Stages of the policy process, from formulation to evaluation and revision. Introduction. Making a policy and establishing it into law will involve many processes to ensure its success. The policymaking process will involve seeking a solution to challenges through the legal procedures that have been set. The process will include the public, various stakeholders, and the government to ensure that it is smooth and successful. In this regard, the paper will examine stages in the policymaking process. Policy formulation stage. Policy formulation is always the first stage of the policy process. At this stage, the stakeholders identify the issues or challenges that must be addressed. Notably, this stage of the policy process will entail setting the goals and objectives and the process of meeting those goals. Therefore, stakeholders must participate in research, fruitful engagement, and data analysis. Some notable stakeholders in this stage include policymakers, analysts, various subject experts, and a group representing the public interest. The researchers and analysts will provide precise analysis to guide the decision-making process, while experts will share their knowledge and expertise on the policy. The public is engaged because they will provide their feedback on that policy. Legislation stage. The next stage in the policy process is the legislation process. After the policy has been formulated, it goes through the legislative process to ensure it has been enacted into law. At this stage, the stakeholders will draft and introduce bills for debate. Typically, the discussion will involve hearing and voting to ensure the majority accepts the bill. The major components involved in legislation are the bill drafting, hearings through the committee, debates on the House floor, and finally, the voting process. The major stakeholders in this group include the legislators, interest groups, and the public. Legislators draft and introduce bills in the House. They also conduct hearings and debates to ensure everybody understands the bill. Interest groups provide information about the bill, which helps the debating process. Throughout the process, the public is requested to provide input and feedback about the policy. Implementation stage. The other stage of the policy process is the implementation process. Once the policy has been enacted into law, it will be forwarded for implementation by the government and other public and private agencies. At this stage, the development and implementation of regulations will be used. In addition, procedures and programs connected to the policy goals will also be introduced. Some critical components necessary for the implementation stage are rulemaking, allocation of resources, and policy program management. Notable stakeholders in the implementation stage include the government, the public, and implementing organizations. Government agencies are responsible for implementing the policy while setting the regulations. It would be ideal for the implementing organizations to provide feedback on the policy to allow for changes to be accurately implemented. Evaluation stage. The other stage is the evaluation process. It is essential as it allows policymakers to assess whether the policy is effective. In addition, the evaluation process also assesses whether the policy is achieving its goals. Fundamentally, the stage will involve collecting data, analyzing, and reporting to ensure that the goals are met. Some stakeholders include the policymakers, the public, government agencies, and other bodies involved in the policy from the start to the end. Constant feedback must be available because the policy must be effective and efficient. Analysis stage. The stage involves continuous monitoring and analysis of policy issues. The stakeholders will note key developments in areas that require adjustments. In the study, the stakeholders will evaluate whether the policy's initial goals have been met. The critical components involved are research, data analysis, and trend monitoring. In this regard, the key stakeholders involved in the analysis stage are the policymakers, the public, government agencies, and analysts, among other groups. The goal is to ensure that the policy aligns with the initial objectives. Nothing should be taken for granted. Revision stage. This stage involves correcting and changing the policy. The policymakers and stakeholders will be involved in discussions to assess its success. The policy revision will be based on research and findings from the previous stages. At this point, policymakers have already identified the challenges, and it has become a point to address them. Some of the critical components involved in this stage include establishing policy proposals, updating the legislation, and engaging the public on their policy recommendations. The critical stakeholders in this stage include legislators, interest groups, and the general public. Conclusion. In conclusion, the policy process involves various stages that ensure its success. In each stage, expectations and goals must be met with identified stakeholders. Notably, each stage will have its stakeholders to streamline the process. Essentially, stakeholders such as the government and the general public will provide constant feedback at each stage of the process. In the end, the policy will become law through the mentioned processes.